So where are you currently located at right now?
In Birmingham, and our business is just and then she and her husband settled a series of these together. And I was saying
real quick. It sounds real like echoey, like it's almost like duplicating your voice.
Can you hear that, Mark?
How is it now? Sure.
Yeah, it's doing like an echo. Let me hear you say something again. I'll see if it does it.
Yeah. So we were talking about.
That's perfect. That's perfect right there.
Great.
Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just kind of talking about all of this time. She talks about her business, and our other associates are doing the same thing. And I think this is the first official time that we've been able to do. We have done some community kinds of things using her facility, but this is the first time we've been able to do some business together. And I hope that if this goes the way I think it will, we'll want to continue to do our podcasts here. Got about 6 or 7 coming up.
Yeah, video looks great. Audio sounds perfect now. Okay, well, what I want to do is I want to get started. You are our Juneteenth episode. So this super excited to push this out. I want to start off with some rapid fire questions for you.
Got it.
First, a book other than yours, because we're going to talk about yours, that you would recommend for our listeners.
Okay, the one that I would recommend and love is called Lead the Field. And that is written by Earl Nightingale. Does a great job for those of us who are constantly trying to position ourselves for a winning experience.
Okay. One bucket list place for you to travel to. Where would you go?
Cairo, Egypt.
Okay.
And I'm going to hit that bucket list in September, by the way.
I like it. Being intentional with it. I like that.
Yep.
What is a fear that you have?
Fear of failure, I guess, in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
And the failure that I'm referring to is the failure that becomes that last point that says it's done.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to believe that there's no such thing as failure until we give up and we can't get back up and take another shot at it. And so I'm determined for the rest of my life, and I'm trying to make certain that as many people as I can touch understand the fear of failure is not having fallen, it's not getting up to give it another shot.
It's a good way to look at it. A lot of people hit a roadblock and view that as failure, but like you said,
absolutely.
Once you finally tap out, that's it.
Yep.
All right, fun one here for you. Your go-to movie. You have a day off, have nothing to do.
I've been getting into a number of Netflix, not on my own, but with my niece. She kind of gets into that. I've never had the consistency of time to get caught up in series, but I have been of late. But I will tell you that my go-to movie that just kind of calms me is Brother, Where Art Thou? George Clooney and the gang. I just love the soundtrack of that movie, and just the acting is just phenomenal. And I've seen each one of those characters in other settings, and it's hard to believe that they could even be acting. That's just who you are. But they're so good at it. But I love the messaging in that that movie.
Now I got to follow up with what Netflix series have you been watching?
So Ozark was the one that
good.
So I got caught up in that one with Marty and Wendy, 2 actors and actresses that I really have enjoyed in other movies that they've had. Vikings was another one that I bought, and so she keeps me abreast. The next series is coming out, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. And I need to relax a little bit more anyway, and so I love the idea that I can get involved in these. But typically, that hadn't been me.
Okay, and final question for you: you could have dinner for three historical figures who are no longer with us. Who do you break bread with?
Number one would be Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
I so appreciate that person and his example to have suffered and have gone through. You're talking about shadows, and then to have come out in such grace and humility, which represents so much of what I think we're trying to communicate in the book. I'd love to spend some time with John F. Kennedy. He was quite the thinker at such an early age to have been able to do what he did, his total experience. So that would make, in my mind, an awesome dinner for three. But if you're saying three characters other than myself, I think Maya Angelou would be an interesting one. I love her poetic genius, and some of the comments that she's made are keepers for me that I use almost on a daily basis. I had an opportunity, of course, to spend time with her, actually, did a portrait of her that I'm going to present either this afternoon or later. And it was where, Trip, I had a chance to present this piece to her after one of her performances. And if you've heard her, she has this very kind of deep, commanding voice. And she complimented me, referred to me as a young man. And she said, I wonder if you could prepare one of these prints for a good friend of mine. And I said, of course I could. Who might that be, Dr. Angelou? She said, Oprah Winfrey. Yes, I can make that happen immediately. So I presented the number one of that series to Maya. And of course, Oprah has number two. Condoleezza Rice has one of the first 10 series. And so it's just awesome what happens in your career serendipitously. But I'll take it. I'll take it.
Wow. When was this?
Gosh, this must have been, she was there to dedicate a performing arts pavilion at Baton Rouge Community College.
Okay.
And she was the speaker, and I presented her the number one of that series. As it turned out, they wanted me to do a piece of art for an auction. I suggested that since Maya Angelou is coming, why don't I do a picture of her with other performing artists? And it became a fundraiser for that school. We didn't sell any of those prints. It was a 500 print series. We didn't sell those, but if you made a $500 contribution, then we would you'd get one of these framed and matted prints with a certificate of authenticity. Turned out to be a $250,000 project for that school. And I just enjoyed working with that. But that must have been around, 2010, 2011, somewhere in there.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Already off to a good start with this. This is a crazy journey. We haven't got into it yet. So let's start off
just
talking
never
about,
know.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about your upbringing. So, here on the Shadows, we like to talk about our stories, chronicle people's stories, what they've been through, all those shadows moments that they've taken and embraced and made that part of their journey. You grew up segregation in Montgomery, Alabama. What was it like? Like, what did just kind of paint the picture for your childhood? What did your parents do? Siblings, so on and so forth.
Right. So I was raised with three sisters, had an older brother, but he was kind of out of the way, off the scene. So I'm pretty much with my sisters and growing up. Both my parents were chefs. So I grew up around food. Unfortunately, Trip, both of them passed on before I had gone full circle and have gotten back into the restaurant business. Dad was a baker at the VA hospital, 40 plus years. My mother was a lunchroom manager. So you can imagine when I got in trouble in elementary school, I was never sent to the office. I was sent to the lunchroom. Yeah. And I would much rather have gone to the office. But interesting dynamic there. But Dad and I would work. He would be a short order cook in the evenings and weekends, and I'd be the bus boy. So we spent a lot of time working together. He taught me how to crack and empty an egg with one hand. We messed up a lot of eggs trying to teach me that. I had no idea that the size of one's hand would have a lot to do with that process, but he was good at it. But he would be so proud to know that his son today not just work at a restaurant, but own 7 restaurants. To have a conversation with him be great.
I bet.
Yeah.
What were some of your aspirations growing up as a kid?
Uh, wow. I learned early on that I had artistic talents. So that was kind of a given and a natural for me. And I always thought that I could be an artist. I always wanted to be an artist, but the social construct messaging didn't speak to me being an artist. Now, that might sound a little weird, but if you look at the great American artists, if you look at those artists during the Baroque period, the Renaissance artists, Monet, Renoir, Titian, El Greco, none of those artists, Trip, looked like me. And my mother would make such a big fuss over my artwork, and I just felt like a little Black Rembrandt growing up all the way through, because she'd take my little drawings and she'd pass them around the club meetings. It was just fascinating to me. But I never saw or knew a Black artist. So we're on a speaker series right now with 7 or 8 high schools in Birmingham. Every single visit, I have my portfolio because I can connect, and I'm sensitive to the fact that there's talent and they need to see me. And I certainly want to see them. So on each one of these, I'm presenting one of my prints. We did one high school this morning. We'll do another high school this afternoon. Just so that you'll know this, that high school purchased some 2,800 of these books. And the 10th grade class, they've read the book, reviewed the book. And before I got started today speaking for the first time, I had about 10 questions before I ever opened my mouth. They were so excited about the messaging in the book. But yeah, I always wanted to be, thought I could be an artist, but I'd never had a Black artist. And I think about it all the time. If he or she could have walked into one of my classrooms, the confirmation, the affirmation that I could really be an artist would have been sealed, in my opinion. But social construct said that I couldn't be an artist, nor could any woman be an artist, because none of those pictures looked like a Black person or any person of color or a woman. And so that's what happens. Social construct is a real enemy. And that's what we work to try to change.
As an artist, what do you think of the new thing Crayola is pushing out with all the different skin tones? Have you seen that? The new line of crayons?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Have you seen the new line of crayons that Crayola's pushed out?
I have not.
Yeah, it's they have them like at Walmart's and everywhere you check it, but it's all the different skin tones, and it's, you know, with the whole concept of, you know, how can you, like you said, see yourself being something if you can't even draw yourself or color yourself? Or
absolutely.
Yeah, check it out next time you go through a Wally World.
I will
have them out there. And
for sure.
You've mentioned your mom and dad. What are some things that you do today that, if you were to really sit back and think about it, that's something they instilled and taught into you, where you're like, oh, this is my mom, or oh, this is my dad speaking to me right now?
Right. I'd say on my mother's side, she was the affectionate one. My dad, we knew that he loved us, but if we were ever waiting to hear those words, you know, that was not going to happen. And I think it had a lot to do with the traditions of that day. But mom was the affectionate one. She could call you over and just love on you for no obvious reason, not because of a grade or because you'd done something right.
Unless you got sent to the cafeteria.
Yeah. And if you got sent to the cafeteria, it did not change how she felt about you. And you knew that. That's so important for parenting. In my business, we see the detriment of poor parenting on a daily basis. And to have had that has been so supportive. She always made a fuss about my artwork and encouraged me of what I could do. Dad was a worker. I think I learned my strong work ethic from my father. And I just remember him going to work every day. I don't recall him ever not having 2, maybe 3 jobs on a consistent basis. That was Dad. So he was a hustler, full-time job, but in the evenings we would do these other chores. So I think the affectionate piece, I'm so happy that I got that. And so with my son and my daughters, it's as natural as breathing for me to say those words to my kids. I love you, because I've never heard that from Dad. But the work ethic, and it's interesting. And I will tell you that a lot of times, Trip, those voids that we experience can sometimes create a block for us, and it shouldn't. My parents, as most parents probably, were doing the best that they could with what they had to work with. But I hear too often the way that I am is because of what I didn't have in parents. Well, we got to consider how my parents' parents were and how their parents' were. So let's stop blaming anybody and start to think about, what can I do with what they did do well, and what can I do to correct those for my kids and grandkids?
Yeah. And, one thing that I really want to talk about that was really intriguing doing my research, getting ready for this episode, was that you were one of 6 African-American students at, I believe it was age 12?
Correct.
In an all-white school. And I've moved. I've gone to different schools before. My daughter is currently about to go through this in about 2 months. She's going to be going to a new high school cross country as we move to California. But I think a big thing about this podcast is being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And because you can't understand someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. We hear that all the time. But for our listeners out there, our listeners, especially like even myself, take us through, if you can recall, like what it was. Every kid dreads the first day of class, but for you, going to a school where you're one of 6, what was it like the night before? What was it like lacing your shoes that morning of, on the way to school, like walking down the hall? Like I'm trying to, like, I want to feel like what it was that you were going through at that age. And what did that teach you today?
Wow, what a great question, Trip. It was not only what we felt, what I felt, but it was pretty clear that the community felt it. I'll say this, just about everybody in the community was just fine with us staying segregated. So that might sound strange to you, but we were comfortable. We were comfortable. And so the risk of sending 6 Black students into a foreign place for a foreign experience, we had never been around whites in that capacity. Whites had never been around us in that capacity, on what you might call an even playing field. And I will tell you that it was so traumatic getting on that bus amidst those white faces and then exiting the bus into essentially all white faces. It was a foreign world to me. Imagine I'm just 12 years old. I'm just reaching puberty, just identifying with myself, figuring me out. And these tremendous messages of inferiority coming at me on a daily basis. It was unbelievable. Very difficult to even put words together about what we all felt in that experience. And those subtle, unspoken messages that reduced you to essentially nothing worked on me. And as it did on those who stayed. We had 1 or 2 students who didn't finish the school year because of that messaging. You drink water, nobody would drink water after you. You would sit at a lunchroom table, everybody would get up and leave you there. Not a whole lot was said. We never heard much of the N word so much, but the subtle messages of inferiority. What comes to mind more than anything else was the fact that Dr. King was killed later in that same school year, 68. And I was never able to calibrate the somber, sad, kind of a melancholy tone of the community and my mom crying. My dad was a very firm, strong gentleman, but he was visibly moved. I couldn't fully appreciate who Dr. King was, but I knew something terrible had happened for our community. But to exit the school bus that next day into this kind of joyous jubilance, celebratory atmosphere was something that I never, ever could calibrate. Two completely different circumstances over one situation. That bothered me. And of course, I remember turning off to school. The messaging was so great that I just didn't do well. Went to summer school that year, went to summer school the next year at Robert E. Lee High School, and I would repeat that experience throughout my high school experience trip, not graduating with my class, but graduating in summer school. And there's an interesting story of what happened in the 11th grade that changed the trajectory of how I felt about education, about me, and about life. And at some point, we'll get to that.
You mentioned, at your school, they were joyous after, a tragedy, and then some of the struggles you had to go through academically. Who or where did you go to for strength during those times?
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I really went to my art. Which is why art is so special to me today. I don't sell my art. It seems disingenuous to sell what's been the catalyst to create the Larry Thornton of today. Everything that I do today has come through my art. Even how I see life, how I see business is through the lens of an artist. During those turbulent days and times, I would illustrate and I would draw, self-express. And I would say to any mom who has a child, whether it's creative writing, poetry, thespian, music, art, any of the performing arts, when we get to self-express, we are some of the most fortunate people on earth, in my opinion, because we get to take out of us and put it out. So how did I use art? I would draw my way out of those circumstances. And I don't mind saying to you that some of the stuff that I was drawing was not good, but it worked for me. I got in trouble for what I was drawing occasionally, but it was getting that hate and that resentment out of me and onto paper that really made a difference to me. I remember the coach walking me to the office because I wouldn't admit that I drew a certain thing about whatever I was experiencing at that time. And on the way to the office, I admitted it. We had a great conversation and he was so supportive, but he needed me to admit that. But it was so helpful to me to have that. We had leadership that made a big difference. And of course, each year, more and more Blacks would come to the schools, Robert E. Lee. And I like to think that sports, the band, music, kind of serve as a catalyst to iron out some of the divide. Once you get on that field and you're winning, or you're performing together and you're winning, which is why this book is so important. Why not win? But we have to do some self-reflection, get some things out of our way in order to get to that winning circumstance.
And who's the first person that you encountered from a different background, different experience? I'd love to hear, being put in that school, one of six, who was the first white person that you interacted with that really invested and put time in you to where it started to change your perception a little bit?
Sure. Well, that's an excellent question. And it's a very easy question for me. So I would go on with this poor academic experience, 9th grade, 10th grade, the 11th grade. Well, as a junior, your entire purpose was to, as a student, to so position your schedule so as to take senior English from anybody other than this lady named Miss Nichols. And to give you some context, Miss Nichols was a retired World War II veteran. So I need not say any more. She was firm, rigid, never heard of grading on a curve. It was straightforward. She didn't smile or laugh a lot. I mean, she was the talk of the school. Do not take senior English from Ms. Nichols. Well, I wasn't very smart. I ended up with Ms. Nichols for both session room and senior English. And as they would say around my restaurants today, OMG. it was as if this lady learned our names overnight, and she would stand at the door to her room and welcome us in a trip by name into what we all believed was our daily dosage of hell, Miss Nichols. I always had a thing for teachers. My second grade teachers, where I discovered for the first time that I had artistic ability. She was something of an artist. My seventh grade teacher, Ms. Robinson, looked a lot like a friend of mine by the name of Joanne. I thought she was the most beautiful lady. This is in the seventh grade. I must have married Ms. Robinson 5 times in my dreams, but whenever I wake up, Mr. Robinson was still there. And so I've got this thing about teachers, and now I've got this Miss Nichols. What? Miss Nichols assigned Tripp for me a book report, and she chose the book that I should read. The name of the book was written by John Bunyan, was called The Pilgrim's Progress. And I was fascinated with the characters in the book. There were characters like mercy, forgiveness, charity, love, and they would act out the essence of their names. And so I think it kind of tapped into the creativity aspect of me. Ms. Nichols places a B+ on my desk. She is shocked. I am shocked. But it was enough for her to know that this kid had been caught up in this racial circumstance, and I'm going to do something about it. What a great message for us all to understand the value of making a difference in someone's life beyond the classroom. Ms. Nichols invited me to do some yard work because she knew that that's what my dad and I did on Saturdays. We'd go to the white folks' house, is the way that we would say that. We never knew their names. The names were always incidental. And I just recall the wax paper wrapped sandwiches out of the back door, the paper cups of water. That's just the way it was in the 60s. We did some yard work. I could barely remember much at all. But when it was time for lunch, she invited me in through the front door. She had a place set for 3 people. She lived with her sister. And she's talking to me, Tripp, saying these wonderful things to me. She wanted to get me off of the educational turf to relate to me. And I'll always be grateful to her for that. She was saying these things, but I like to put it this way. I was so busy listening to what she was doing that I heard very little of what she had to say, which is a message to all of us. Some of the most pointed, some of the most powerful, some of the most poignant messages that we will ever deliver or receive will occur without the employment of a single word. That's what Ms. Nichols did. She was demonstrating and reversing 4 years of what I had experienced to send a message to me, not with words. She was saying good stuff, but I'm watching what you're doing. You're treating me as a valued person. That's not what I've had over the past 4 years. But I do remember her recapturing my listening attention when she said to me, Larry, I think you ought to go to college. Now, nobody had ever used my name, Tripp, and college in the same sentence, ever. Why would they, given my academic missteps? But if Ms. Nichols said it, there must be merit to it, because she was not about small talk. She wasn't frivolous at all. The idea that I could really be college material was intriguing to me. Even though at first I went home laughing with my homeboys. Guess what old Battle Axe said to me, man? She thinks I ought to go to college. Can you believe that? But subconsciously, she's working on reversing 4 years of who I really was. On another conversation, I said, what will I study, Ms. Nichols, in college? She said to me, you can study art. Never knew that that was a thing. You helped me with my bulletin board all year long. Study art. I found a little junior college, started to study art, performing very well, 2 semesters, 2 quarters, transferred to a university that I couldn't have even gotten in the beginning, and went on to become a trustee and chairman of the board of trustees of that university, Alabama State University. That's what happens.
Right around here.
Right there.
Yeah.
That's what happens when we don't allow our missteps to define us. And too many people live a life in the past because they can't get over. My constant prayer, because I don't want to get stuck, not just for me, but for other people. Help me, oh God, get over what I just can't seem to get past. And we think that the Why Not One Institute allows us some latitude in helping people to do just that.
What a powerful story about Miss Nichols. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. That's really good to hear. Just someone listening and sharing some words, spending some time, actually being interested in someone else can go such a long way and change the trajectory of someone else. And in the past, 50 years, looking back on your journey, we're going to get into your book and McDonald's and everything, but looking at the trajectory of where we are as a country from 1960s here in Montgomery to where we are today. Obviously, we're not where we need to be, but what are some of the big significant strides you think we've made as a society?
Well, I will clearly say not enough, but I think getting to a point, Trip, where we can visibly see people differently. I think that's another social construct issue that we have. In the latter part of the prologue of my book, I pose a question that I think has to be one of the innermost personal questions that any of us can ask of ourselves. And the question is this: what is it that you see when you see me? What is it that I see when I see you? Because how you see me dictates how you handle me. And if we can challenge ourselves internally, not through the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, not through the Civil Rights Museum or the Rosa Parks Museum, not through Leadership Montgomery or Leadership Birmingham or Leadership Alabama, it's personal. Can we call the question and challenge ourselves to write our vision of what we ought to see when we see other people in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of sexual orientation, housing status, financial status, ableness? Most of us have at least one bias. And if we're willing, we can call the question personal. Is this honest? Is this just? Is this the best that I can do? And for most of us, there's room for improvement. If you want to be better, I want to be better, because when I'm better, I render a better and a greater service. And so we're on a mission with these high schools and with the Why Not Win Institute. I am daily committed to helping build a better community. And the way you do that is that we challenge ourselves. It's not external. I think it's more internal. The more people that we can invite into our sphere of influence, the better off we are. But quite the opposite happens. We close people out who do not look like us, people who might not think the way we think, who might not believe what we believe. But when we close people out, what we are not aware of most of the time is that simultaneously we are closing ourselves in. And when you're closed in, there's no growth opportunity with that. We do ourselves a great disservice and the community a great disservice when we do that.
Yeah, really got to be truthful with ourselves. Like you said, those biases that we tend to have. And shout out to those Montgomery museums too. I tell people, I'm like, if you were here, you have got to. We walked by the Legacy Museum last night, and my daughter was saying how that's one of the most powerful things she's ever been through.
Strong messaging.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing how they put it together. Speaking of, Juneteenth, the time this episode is being released, it's going to be Juneteenth. What
Yeah.
does that day signify and mean to you, if you were to put it in your own words?
Well, I think it's a kind of a rightening of the process. Look,
Long overdue.
I think it kind of creates an opportunity and a level of awareness. I think a lot of times there's a lack of exposure so that we think what we believe, we think what we think, and we believe what we believe, and it's not true at all. It has in my mind, it has more to do with ignorance, more so than anything. And I would divide ignorance up into at least two categories. There is what I would call willful ignorance, the person who sought out in Buffalo to find out where Black people shop, and I'm going to kill as many as I can. That is just willful ignorance. But I run into a lot of what I call innocent ignorance. I really don't believe what I think I believe. And if you'll go through my book, whenever that happens, you'll see episode after episode where it's proven that you were never of that mind, ever. You were just ignorant and you didn't have the opportunity. So when we talk about Juneteenth, I think it's an opportunity to kind of create awareness. To tell you what we're doing on one of our projects, I spoke at East Tennessee State University. East Tennessee State University is in Appalachia, in Johnson City. It is 97% majority white institution. We worked with the honors students. In that experience, we had 3 students in that class of 18 of the sharpest students you'd ever want to meet. But 3 of them said, I've never met a Black person in my life. I've been around, I've seen, but I've never met. And Trip, that stuck in my throat. It's like, wow. And then when you think about it, it's not so strange, because you can ask the average person within your community or mine, how many Asians have you met? Gotten to know.
I've seen it in the Air Force. I've seen people say the exact same thing.
Right. How many Indians have you gotten to know? I have an Indian delegation who wants to own a McDonald's franchise, and I'm having a wonderful time getting to know culture and customs. Vanish has invited me for dinner. Can't wait to go to dinner, to an Indian dinner in the home of an Indian person. So it's that kind of thing. But here's what we're doing. We have identified Tennessee State University, which is an HBCU, pretty much just the opposite. And we have their honors students. We were in Tennessee State University and East Tennessee State all in 1 week. And we have put the partnership together. I am so excited about this opportunity. These honors students will get a chance to spend 3 days on each other's campus.
Oh, wow.
That's going to be huge.
Yes.
For building a better community. And when the East Tennessee State students come to Tennessee State, they're coming during homecoming. They're going to really get a feel for the Black experience from an educational perspective. And each of those communities will teach each other. Now, I'm convinced that if we can make this work, there are so many other opportunities. Alabama and Stillman, Baton Rouge, LSU, and Southern University, Tuskegee University, and Auburn. We want to see more of these rather than traveling over the waters for foreign studies. How about let's just study right down the street to understand each other better? So we're excited about that program because it's going to help exposure, first of all. Then we're going to build a better community in the process of that experience. Can't wait for it to happen. I think perhaps this fall we're on tap to see that manifest itself.
Such a simple idea, but so brilliant. Like it's so, like you're in each other's backyards, like literally right there. Yeah.
Right there.
And next thing I want to ask you is talk about your time at Coca-Cola. You mentioned being an artist, as a sign painter to an advertising manager, and how, that being like your first break. what would like 12-year-old version of you think to see like, wow, I've gone from this to this?
Yeah. Well, 12-year-old Larry Thornton couldn't understand why he was at Goodwin Junior High School. And I say in the book, that was exactly a question that I got this morning at one of the high schools that we visited. What would you say to your 12-year-old self? Well, it's easy, it's in the book. I would go back to say, number one, I have no idea why my mother would volunteer me to be in this setting. But it was time for me, even at that age, to lean in to help write a very storied and sordid history. I remember in elementary school getting books that were 10 and 15 years old. We only got books that had been passed on from the white community. And we're studying history and things that happened that wasn't in that book. It was just, but we never thought anything about it. There were notes in the book. Nobody ever thought about that. So it was my time, even at a young age. And I remember saying in the book that if I could go back to that 12-year-old Larry Thornton, I would say this: I know that you were afraid. I know that you are uncertain, you're uncomfortable. But if you conquer this, you will have impressed and made an impression on a history that needs to be turned. You will create a ripple effect that will be a benefit to your children and your children's children and a better community. I couldn't see that then. Thank God that my mother saw it. And I must say at least 3 times in the book, Trip, if you can't take anything, you can't have anything. The more you can take, the more you can endure, the more you can have. So simple, so basic, so true, yet so misunderstood. Most people miss their end, many people, I should say, not because they're incompetent or incapable. They can't take the BS of life, and there's a lot of it. The average woman can tell you several stories about how she's been marginalized, how she's got a brain, and how she has, but there's a story. The average person of any other ethnic race can tell you a story in this country of how they've been marginalized. But if we can get past that, if we can get beyond that and not be moved by it, not react, there are times that I could have reacted even before getting my first franchise, and I never would have gotten my first franchise. But what led to Coca-Cola, they terminated about 8 of us at Vestavia High School as a teacher. Not because of anything that had occurred. I'd never heard of losing a job without having created an offense. That was foreign to my psyche. Is that a thing? Yes, there's a thing. That is a thing. Monies had been prorated and moved from education into another area during Bob James's administration. And when the principal called me in to tell me that there would not be enough money to sponsor 2 art teachers and that I was being released, it was just beyond tragic to me. I couldn't fix that in my head. And I was just stuck. And the assistant principal from the middle school came to see me and he said, man, you got to get on with your life. Everybody else had gone on to get jobs in other systems or in the corporate arena. I was stuck. And as they say in the story of the prodigal son, when he came unto himself, when I came unto myself, I realized, Trip, that they hadn't taken my job. They took their job. It was up to me to go and get my job. And that's where the entrepreneurial bug bit me. So when I went to Coca-Cola, I never went to stay. I went to perfect my sign artistry skills. And I was hired in over the phone, talking about the benefits of relationships. I taught the daughters of the executive vice president of Coke, called them. I'm running a game, though. I just want to get in the shop to learn how to paint signs. He hired me over that phone call, never applied, never filled out an application. The strength and the value of relationships. So I'm in the sign shop. When I get to Coca-Cola, nobody can paint a sign as well as I can paint a sign. So I'm thinking, man, I can't learn anything here. So within 4 months, I'm promoted to advertising manager. I have an all-white report. This will be great for Juneteenth. So let me say it this way. If racism existed, I can't point to many experiences when I taught school, because that would have been what we might describe as professional racism. What a terrible term, but that's the way I would assign that. When I'm in the sign shop, this is what I would call good old boy, rebel flag wearing, tobacco chewing, just in your face racism. Mm-hmm. And it was so different and so shocking. And there's an interesting story that I can tell you about that experience. So I get promoted. I'm excited, but I'm not going to get used to this because I ain't going to sit before nobody and be fired again. And then the company car came, and hey, it's pretty good. Had a car phone. You're not old enough to know what a car phone is?
I do. I do. And I was going to say too, I'm sure that everybody that worked there was probably thrilled when you got promoted as well.
Yeah.
Talking about that culture that was there.
Yeah, it was just crazy. And even when I went to getting my first McDonald's franchise, so surely I'm leaving now, and they wouldn't take my resignation. The guy wouldn't have it. So the long and short of it is that I have literally been leaving Coca-Cola for 43 years, and I haven't left yet. So from $5 an hour to the boardroom, to be able to say that I have not missed a check from Coca-Cola in 43 years, from there to the boardroom. Just wow. An interesting. That is a great American story, Trip. Yeah. But it is an even more awesome African-American story.
Jeez. What is it? Segregation in the South to America's boardrooms. And talk about McDonald's. How did you get into the McDonald's franchise? And then talk about, because you were the first African-American franchisee at Birmingham, I believe.
In Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
And then just kind of pair the irony of this. I'm visiting in Chicago with friends, and I happened upon a gentleman by the name of Herman Petty. Herman Petty was the first African-American to own a McDonald's in the system, period. He opened his first restaurant in 1968. So I'm talking to Herman, and he's trying to encourage me that opportunities are opening up in the South and that I should give it a shot. And I'm saying, man, I don't know anything about food, but I've been around food, my mom and my dad. He said, they'll train you. But as we would visit his restaurants, he had 3 restaurants at that time. And what struck me, coming from the South and knowing our history in Birmingham, I would watch all of these white patrons coming in and out of his restaurant. And after about 10 minutes of it, I couldn't hold it anymore. I said, Herman, do you really believe that white folk are going to come into a Black-owned business in Birmingham, Alabama? You really think that? He said, of course they will. It's not about you. It is the strength of the brand. And I marvel at that. And of our 7 restaurants, I have at least 3 that are majority white traffic. And to this day, as I sat in the lobby and I watch all of these white folk coming in and out of the restaurant, they don't know who I am. I never reveal who I am unless it comes up in some way. But I always remember that story with him. But yeah, it was quite a challenge getting started, as you might imagine, and how unwelcome I was made to feel trying to become the first Black to own a McDonald's in the city of Birmingham.
Do you have any this way in Montgomery?
No. Yeah, all are right here in Birmingham.
Oh, all in Birmingham. Okay.
Right. McDonald's tries to keep you within a 60-mile radius of your stores. And I understand why, because, I mean, there's stuff happening all the time and you need to get there, you know. And of course, now my son is in the business, so I can be here doing this podcast and spend time in the community as we're doing with the schools and all.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely have to let you know next time I'm in Birmingham.
Absolutely. I'd love to meet you.
Couple of final questions here for you. First, that book. We got to talk about your book.
We got to talk about the book.
Tell us about your book, the genesis of it, and where can people find a copy of it?
Great. All right. Why not win? I am so excited about this book, and the genesis of the book had more to do with the fact that as I looked around in Birmingham, Alabama, or in the South, if you were to minus Atlanta, there were so few African Americans that I found doing the things that I was doing, becoming the first Black to open a McDonald's in the city of Birmingham, serving on corporate boards where they pay you to come to meetings. And I wanted to open up that opportunity. If this book is about anything at all, it is about personal accountability, personal responsibility, personal disciplines. What are those rudiments of thought, those processes of thinking that leads to a winning experience? I think everybody pretty much wants to win, but too many people are not aware of their own role in that process. And that's the thing that makes a difference, I think. We'd like to think that we're opening up those opportunities and those discussions through our Why Not Win Institute. So I write the book. Then the lady who writes the introduction, who was in secondary education, today she's a PhD, Dr. Zilla Fluker, she writes a wonderful introduction, but she comes back and she says to me, Larry, I have extracted over 100 quotes from your manuscript. And I'm thinking, what manuscript did you read? Because as I'm writing, you're not thinking of quotable stuff. You're just kind of writing your heart out. And she had them all segmented. And I'm thinking, yeah, I said that. That's me. And she has subsequently written a curriculum from Why Not Win. And we have initiated the Why Not Win Institute, which has taken us on about 35 to 40 college campuses. And this series that we're doing right now with Birmingham City high schools, where we will go into every single high school. They have purchased 1,300 books late last year and have just purchased now 1,490 books. And the kids have already read the books. I mean, I've never been before 10th graders that were so engaged with so many questions. We're just having a ball because I think that they are attentive and getting what we're trying to say, both from the Institute and from the book. This same school coordinator has already committed to 1,500 of the graphic novel book that you can see behind me for her 7th graders next year. And here again, I can't wait to get before those kids. I like to just test it and see what do you say to a 7th grader? Because as I think about me in the 7th grade, it wasn't about listening to guys like me come in and talk, but the book has done so much, Trip, to bring people together. We talked about the East Tennessee State University and the Tennessee State University, that alliance, all because of the book. And now to get before these young people, to get this message to them earlier, that you, solely you, have much more to do with your success than anybody externally involved in your life. I made this statement this morning, and it was kind of a tough statement, but I thought I needed to say it. I said to those kids, I wish that I could tell you that your friends would do everything that they could in defense and in support of your success, but I can't tell you that. I wish that I could tell you, we had several instructors there, but sometimes I just, you feel it, but you want them to know that. I wish I could tell you that every administrator and every teacher at this school would do everything that he or she could do in defense of your success, but I can't tell you that. Most difficult for me to say is that I wish that I could tell you that every one of your parents would do everything that they could do in defense of your success, but I can't promise you that. But don't let any of that deter you. This is all on you. You make the decision. Life is interesting, but only to interesting people. Life is exciting, but only to exciting people. Life is dull, boring, lugubrious, but only to dull, boring, and lugubrious people. It is also true, Trip, that life is successful, but only to successful people. We paint our own worlds, and I wanted them to understand that it's on you. So be interested in anything that you do. It makes you an interesting person. Get excited about anything that you do. That's what makes you an exciting person. So you're trying to bring that full circle back to the individual. You paint your own world.
I love that portion about, life is successful to successful people. I've heard before, people hurt people. And that's kind of what it kind of reminds me of. Yeah. Well, where can they find a copy of the book?
The book is sold on all book sites, Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, the major sites, Amazon,
and
Target? Of course our institute. I'm not sure if Target would have that, but probably would order it. The books have been purchased. It is a nonprofit. But when I think about, now I'm an entrepreneur by heart, okay? I'm sitting here in the studio of another business couple, entrepreneur. So you think about profit.
Yeah.
So when I look at the fact that they're buying these books by the thousands, it makes you wonder. But I happen to believe also that the universe works with those who work with the universe. And so I don't get concerned about that. And I think of all of the people who have written books and can't sell 100, and yet here these are moving the way that they are. Just exciting.
We'll have the link in our resource recommendations on the website, but if you don't want to do the legwork to go over to the website, we'll have it in the podcast episode description as well. And final two questions for you here. You mentioned earlier that people have asked you all the time, like, what would you say to 12-year-old version of yourself? But I want to flip that. What would 12-year-old version of you say, looking at all the success that you've done today?
Yeah, well, I will tell you that at 12, he certainly didn't see today. But even more important to me, Ms. Nichols cannot see. By the time I realized the significant impact that she had on my life, I was well into my adult life, and I go back to Robert E. Lee to find her because I want to share. But she had already passed on. And this one of the things that I say to those who are involved in community work, and even the studio that I sit in today, they have been involved in community work with me. There's so much work to be done outside of ourselves. We can't afford just to be concerned about our own. It's all about making the community better for all of us. I couldn't see what's happening today, but Ms. Nichols didn't get to see it either. And whenever a college comes online, I just look to the heavens. Ms. Nichols, are you getting this? Can you believe it? This is the kid that you couldn't get to read a book. Now a college has adopted my book, and 2 of those colleges have courses for honors students. The name of the course trip is Why Not When? I am just so humbly grateful for this opportunity and the space that I share today to make our community a better place.
Yeah, I heard one time by somebody here on the podcast, they said, great leaders, great mentors, great advisors plant the seeds, but don't necessarily get to see the tree grow and to sit under the shade, but it still grows nonetheless. And yeah, Miss Nichols is an example of that. And final question for you. When all's said and done, 50 years from now, so we chronicled a very good 50-year journey for you here on this episode. 50 years from now, what do you want people to say when they mention your name?
I love for them to say, think, and believe that here was a guy that was not just about himself and his own, but about the community. Everything that we ever receive, every dime that we will ever earn must come by, through, and from other people, the community. And I so believe that. When I served on the Community Foundation, I had little to no awareness of all of the amenities, all of the benefits that I had enjoyed for years. And I had no idea of the thinking, the planning, and the amount of dollars it took to put our 3-part series together and to maintain those spaces. And so having a broad awareness of that and the significance of it, you said it just a moment ago, I think about the fruit that I've eaten from trees that I took no part in planting or pruning. It just makes sense to plant a few trees while we're here for others after we are gone. That's probably the one thing that I want, not the boards that I served on, or not the number of restaurants that I own and that my son might own, but what did he do to make the community a better place?
I like it. Final comments for our listeners.
Let's win in life, and let's not miss the opportunity or the awareness that we play the most significant role in our process for winning in life, and not winning just for yourself, but winning for others as well. Thank you very much.
Well, you're definitely doing some winning in life, and this has been a episode that's been tremendous. Perfect timing with where this episode is going to drop. Folks, we hope you have enjoyed every single thing that he has brought your way. Definitely make sure you go out of your way and grab a copy of Why Not Win. We're going to have, like I said, the link will be in this episode description. So whatever podcast platform you're listening to this, even if it's on YouTube, click on the episode description. You'll see a link. It'll take you directly to the book. Do yourself a favor, grab a copy of it. And if you like what we're doing, as always, here on the Shadows Podcast, head over to Spotify, Apple, whatever your preferred podcast platform is. You can also head over to the website, leave us a review, let us know what you think. But until next week, we will see you with another episode of the Shadows Podcast.